The security footage showed him celebrating with champagne while I packed my desk 2 months earlier. He had no idea I was watching. Brandon Miller, the CEO's golden boy, heir to a $50 million company, raised his glass to toast my termination. To new priorities, he laughed, surrounded by his inner circle of yes men. Some people just aren't cut out for the corporate world. What he didn't know was that his own cameras had recorded everything, including the illegal things he'd done while I was on maternity leave. The same leave he'd just fired me for taking. I'm Jessica Parker, and this is the story of how I turned one man's cruelty into his complete destruction. But let's rewind to the moment that changed everything and show exactly how one envelope destroyed a man's empire. 8 weeks earlier, I stood outside the glass doors of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird. 3 months of maternity leave had flown by in a blur of sleepless nights and tiny fingers wrapped around mine. My reflection stared back at me. Professional blazer that didn't quite fit right yet, laptop bag slung over my shoulder, the invisible weight of new motherhood pressing down like a lead blanket. I'd built this place. 7 years climbing from junior analyst to creative director. 7 years of 60-hour weeks, weekend campaigns, client emergencies that pulled me away from dinners and dates, and everything resembling a normal life. But now I had something more important than corner offices and client approvals. I had Lily. The elevator ride to the 14th floor felt like ascending to my own execution. Something in my gut twisted. The same instinct that had saved me from toxic clients and doomed campaigns. But I pushed it down. This was home. These were my people. My team. The elevator dinged. Doors slid open. And there he was. Brandon Miller stood in the hallway like a predator who'd been waiting for wounded prey to stumble into his territory. 28 years old, Harvard MBA, and the kind of entitled smirk that comes from never facing real consequences. His father owned the company. That made Brandon untouchable. Or so he thought. Welcome back, Jessica. His voice carried the warmth of a winter morgue. No smile. No handshake. Just that dead-eyed stare that made my skin crawl. I forced a professional smile. Good to be back, Brandon. How did the Peterson campaign turn out? Instead of answering, he shoved an envelope into my hands. White. Crisp. The kind they use for official company documents. Open it. My fingers trembled as I tore the seal. Inside, a single sheet of company letterhead. 2 words typed in cold, corporate font. You're fired. The world tilted sideways. The hallway seemed to stretch and warp like a funhouse mirror. Voices from nearby cubicles became muffled, distant, like I was underwater. What? The word escaped as barely a whisper. Brandon's smirk widened. Your priorities have changed, Jessica. We need people who are committed. Fully committed. Not part-timers juggling babies and deadlines. The casual cruelty in his voice hit me like a physical blow. Part-timer? I'd worked harder in my worst week than Brandon had in his entire pampered existence. This is illegal, I managed. You can't fire someone for what? Being unreliable? Missing deadlines? Poor performance. He leaned closer, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne mixed with something rotten underneath. Good luck proving otherwise. The envelope crumpled in my fist like paper bones. Around us, my former colleagues pretended to work while their ears strained to catch every word. I could feel their eyes like hot needles against my skin. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked relieved it wasn't them. Nobody spoke up. Nobody defended me. Nobody said a word. I'd given 7 years of my life to these people. Built campaigns that won awards. Brought in clients that kept their paychecks coming. And now they watched me burn like entertainment at a barbecue. Clean out your desk, Brandon said, turning away. Security will escort you out in 20 minutes. 20 minutes to pack 7 years of my life into a cardboard box. I moved through the office like a ghost walking through my own funeral. Awards eyed one gathering dust. Client thank you notes yellowed with age. Photos of team celebrations where I'd smiled and laughed and believed I belonged. Now it all felt like evidence from someone else's life. My hands shook as I pulled personal items from drawers. A coffee mug Lily's father had given me before he decided fatherhood wasn't for him. A small succulent that had somehow survived my neglect. Business cards from clients who'd specifically requested to work with me. All of it meaningless now. The office buzzed with whispered conversations that died when I walked past. 20 minutes to become the cautionary tale they'd share over lunch. The woman who thought she could have it all and learned otherwise. I reached for my laptop, the one I'd used to build million-dollar campaigns, to solve impossible client problems at 2 a.m. to make this company successful. Leave it. Brandon's voice cut through the air like a blade. Company property. Of course. They were taking everything, even the tools I'd used to make them rich. Security arrived exactly on time. 2 guards who'd watched me work late countless nights, now treating me like a criminal. They flanked me as I carried my pathetic cardboard box to the elevator. The same elevator I'd ridden up with hope just an hour earlier. As the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of Brandon through the glass. He was already in my former office, rearranging furniture like I'd never existed at all. But what really broke my heart wasn't his cruelty. It was the relief on my team's faces. Like they were grateful it was me, and not them. The silence that screamed. I sat in my car in the parking garage for an hour, unable to move. The cardboard box mocked me from the passenger seat. 7 years reduced to office supplies and a dying plant. The security badge they'd confiscated had become my identity somewhere along the way. Now I was nobody. Lily's mother. Unemployed. 29 years old and starting over with a 3-month-old baby and enough savings to last maybe 3 months if I lived on ramen and hope. My phone buzzed. Text message from my former teammate, Alexis. So sorry, Jess. This is awful. Brandon's already posted your job opening. Sending thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers? The corporate equivalent of sending condolences to someone still breathing. More texts trickled in throughout the day. All variations of the same theme. Can't believe they did this to you. So unfair. You'll land somewhere better. Not one person offered to help. Not one person condemned Brandon's actions. Not one person risked their own position to stand up for what was right. Because that's how corporate predators win. They pick off the vulnerable while everyone else watches in grateful silence. That night, I sat on my apartment floor, Lily sleeping in my lap, and let the tears come. Not gentle, dignified tears. Ugly, body-shaking sobs that felt like my soul was hemorrhaging. But as I sat there in the wreckage of my career, something else began to take shape. Something cold and sharp and absolutely relentless. If Brandon wanted to play games, I'd show him what real strategy looked like. Little did he know, he just declared war on someone with nothing left to lose. The investigation begins. The next morning, I did something I should have done years ago. I called the Department of Labor. Employment discrimination based on pregnancy or maternity leave is a federal crime, the caseworker explained. Her voice carried the tired authority of someone who'd handled 1,000 cases like mine. Do you have any documentation of discriminatory statements or policies? He said my priorities had changed. That they needed people fully committed, not part-timers juggling babies. Any witnesses? I thought of my former colleagues. Their relieved faces. Their careful silence. Maybe. I don't know if they'll testify. They rarely do, she said quietly. But we'll investigate regardless. I'll need you to document everything you remember. Times, dates, exact words if possible. I hung up and opened my laptop, my personal one, thankfully. If Brandon thought firing me would silence me, he'd underestimated the fury of a mother with nothing left to lose. I started writing. Every meeting where Brandon had made snide comments about working mothers. Every time he'd questioned my commitment when I left at reasonable hours. Every microaggression disguised as concern for my work-life balance. The pattern emerged like invisible ink under heat. Brandon hadn't just fired me impulsively. He'd been building a case against working mothers for months. I was just the test case. But as I dug deeper into my memories, I remembered something else. Something that made my blood turn to ice water. The Peterson campaign. The one I'd been working on before maternity leave. I'd noticed some irregularities in the billing. Charges that didn't match the actual work performed. Hours billed to clients for services never rendered. At the time, I'd assumed it was administrative error. Now I wondered if it was something much worse.
Fraud.
The kind that could destroy careers and trigger federal investigations. The kind that could send people to prison. I spent the next week becoming a digital archaeologist, excavating the ruins of my career for evidence. Luckily, I'd always been paranoid about backing up my work. 7 years of files lived on my personal cloud storage. Email threads, budget spreadsheets, project timelines, client communications.
What I found made my stomach turn.
The Peterson campaign wasn't the only one with billing irregularities. 3 major clients had been systematically overcharged for months. Services billed, but never performed. Hours inflated by 30 to 40% across multiple projects. Brandon's digital signature was on every fraudulent invoice. But the real smoking gun was buried in email metadata. While I'd been on maternity leave, Brandon had been using my electronic signature to approve fake charges, making it look like I'd authorized the fraud. If I hadn't been fired, I would have been the perfect scapegoat when clients discovered the discrepancies. The brilliant, sociopathic bastard had planned to frame me from the beginning. Fire me for being an unreliable mother, then blame me for financial crimes I never committed. 2 birds, 1 stone. Brandon could eliminate a threat and protect himself simultaneously. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated how thoroughly I documented everything. I had timestamps, digital footprints, a paper trail that proved I'd been on federally protected leave when every fraudulent transaction occurred. Brandon had been so eager to destroy me that he'd destroyed himself instead. Building the arsenal. I contacted Rebecca Park, an employment attorney who specialized in corporate discrimination. Her office overlooked the same downtown skyline where I'd once dreamed of building my career. "This is extensive," she said, scrolling through my documentation. "The discrimination case alone is strong. But the fraud allegations." She looked up, eyes sharp as surgical instruments. "This changes everything." "What do you mean?" "Your termination wasn't just illegal, it was part of a cover-up." She leaned back in her leather chair. "Brandon fired you to prevent you from discovering evidence of his financial crimes. That's witness intimidation, obstruction of justice." The words hit me like electricity. So, what do? We contact the FBI. FBI. 3 letters that would turn Brandon's world into a house of cards in a hurricane. That afternoon, I filed complaints with every relevant agency. The Department of Labor for Employment Discrimination, the State Attorney General for Fraud, the FBI for Financial Crimes. Each form felt like loading ammunition into a weapon I'd never wanted to use. But Brandon had forced my hand. While agencies processed my complaints, I played the role of defeated former employee perfectly. I posted generic LinkedIn updates about new opportunities while quietly building something else entirely. A comprehensive dossier on Brandon Miller and his criminal enterprise. I reached out to former employees who'd left Pinnacle under mysterious circumstances. Turns out I wasn't Brandon's first victim. 3 other women had been pushed out after major life events. Marriage, pregnancy, caring for sick parents. The pattern was crystal clear. Brandon targeted anyone whose loyalty might be divided. Anyone who might prioritize family over corporate profits. But none of them had fought back. They'd all signed NDAs and disappeared quietly. I wasn't going to disappear. 2 months after my termination, the first crack appeared in Brandon's facade. Alexis called me, voice trembling with barely contained panic. "Jessica, something's happening. FBI agents are here. They're asking questions about billing practices."
"About you."
My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady. "What kind of questions?" "They want to know about the Peterson campaign. About Brandon's access to your electronic signature. About..."
She paused.
"About whether you were really as unreliable as Brandon claimed." The investigation was moving faster than I'd expected. Federal agencies moved slowly, but when they moved, mountains shifted. "What did you tell them?" "The truth." Her voice cracked. "That you were the most dedicated person in the office. that firing you was insane, that none of us understood why. She stopped abruptly. Alexis? You still there? Brandon just walked past. He looks. Another pause. He looks scared, Jess. Really scared. Good. Fear was the beginning of justice. 3 days later, the news broke. Pinnacle Marketing under federal investigation for financial fraud. The local business journal ran the story on their front page. Brandon's photo stared back at me, the same smug expression he'd worn while destroying my career. But now it looked different. Now it looked like evidence. My phone exploded with calls and texts. Former colleagues suddenly remembered my phone number. Clients who'd worked with me expressing shock and disbelief. The narrative was flipping in real time. Rebecca called within hours. The FBI executed search warrants this morning. Seized computers, files, financial records. Brandon's been placed on administrative leave, pending investigation. Administrative leave. The corporate equivalent of purgatory. But the real satisfaction came that afternoon when a local news reporter called for an interview. We're doing a story about the investigation. Sources tell us you were terminated just before you would have discovered the fraudulent billing practices. Would you be willing to speak on camera? On camera. Where Brandon's victims could finally have a voice. Where the truth could be told without NDAs or legal threats or corporate intimidation. Yes, I said. I'll tell you everything. The television studio felt like a courtroom where I was finally allowed to testify. Bright lights. Professional cameras. A journalist who'd done her homework. Tell us what happened when you returned from maternity leave, she began. I looked directly into the camera and spoke the truth. Every detail of my termination. Every cruel word Brandon had spoken. Every discriminatory policy Pinnacle had ignored. But the real bombshell came when she asked about the billing irregularities. I discovered evidence of systematic fraud, I said calmly. Clients were being charged for services never performed. Hours were inflated. My electronic signature was forged to authorize fake invoices while I was on federally protected maternity leave. The reporter leaned forward. Are you saying you were fired to prevent you from exposing financial crimes? That's exactly what I'm saying. Brandon Miller didn't just discriminate against me for being a mother. He fired me to cover up felony fraud. The interview aired that evening. By midnight, it had been shared 10,000 times on social media. Brandon Miller's name was trending on Twitter. And not in a good way. What happened next exceeded my wildest expectations. The story went viral. Not just locally, nationally. Employment lawyers across the country shared my story as a textbook example of pregnancy discrimination and corporate retaliation. Business publications picked it up. Forbes ran a piece about fraud in marketing agencies. Harvard Business Review used Pinnacle as a case study in toxic corporate culture. Brandon's reputation was obliterated overnight. But the real devastation came from an unexpected source. Within 48 hours of the story breaking, 6 major accounts terminated their contracts. They couldn't afford to be associated with a company under federal investigation for fraud. The Peterson Group, ironically, the account that had exposed Brandon's crimes, issued a public statement distancing themselves from Pinnacle. We take financial irregularities seriously and will be conducting our own investigation into billing practices. Translation: they were coming for every penny Brandon had stolen. 1 week after the interview aired, Rebecca called with an update that made my heart sing. Pinnacle's board of directors voted unanimously to terminate Brandon Miller. Effective immediately. No severance. No golden parachute. Just a box and a security escort. The cosmic irony was perfect. Brandon had fired me with an envelope and 20 minutes to pack. Now he was getting the exact same treatment. But unlike me, he deserved it. The full scope of Brandon's fraud became public 2 months later. $2.3 million stolen from clients over 18 months. Fake invoices. Inflated hours. Services billed, but never performed. The FBI arrested him on a Tuesday morning, the same day of the week he'd fired me. The perp walk photos showed a very different Brandon Miller than the smug executive who'd destroyed my career. Handcuffed. Humiliated. Broken. His father, Pinnacle's founder, issued a statement distancing the company from his son's actions. We are cooperating fully with federal investigators and will make full restitution to affected clients. Translation: Brandon was on his own. The criminal charges were extensive: mail fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, computer fraud. Each count carried potential prison time measured in years, not months. His attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal: 5 years in federal prison, full restitution, lifetime ban from the financial services industry. Brandon rejected it. He still thought his privilege would save him. He was wrong. I testified at Brandon's trial on a Wednesday morning in February. The courthouse was packed with reporters and former employees. The judge had allowed cameras in the courtroom. Brandon's humiliation would be public and permanent. When I took the stand, I looked directly at him. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The arrogance had been replaced by desperation. His lawyer tried to paint me as a disgruntled employee, someone bitter about being fired who'd manufactured evidence for revenge. But the documentation was overwhelming. Digital timestamps, email metadata, financial records that proved every allegation. Brandon had been so confident in his untouchability that he'd left a paper trail a forensic accountant could follow in her sleep. Which, ironically, is exactly what I was. The prosecution's closing argument was devastating. Brandon Miller didn't just steal money. He stole from women who trusted him. He discriminated against mothers. He used his privilege as a weapon to destroy careers and cover up crimes. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Brandon Miller received 12 years in federal prison. No early parole. No minimum security country club. 12 years in real prison with real consequences. The judge's words during sentencing will stay with me forever. You used your position of trust to prey on vulnerable employees and steal from clients. You showed no remorse, no accountability, and no understanding of the harm you caused. This sentence reflects the seriousness of your crimes and serves as a warning to others who might abuse their power. Brandon's father publicly disowned him. Pinnacle Marketing was sold to a competitor. The Miller family fortune, built over 3 generations, was liquidated to pay restitution and legal fees. Brandon had lost everything: his freedom, his family, his future, all because he thought destroying a new mother would be consequence-free. 6 months after Brandon's conviction, Pinnacle's new owners offered to settle my discrimination lawsuit. $2.8 million. I used the settlement money to start my own marketing consultancy, Miller Strategic Solutions. The name was intentional, a daily reminder that the Miller who mattered was me, not the criminal who'd tried to destroy me. My first client was Peterson Group. They wanted to work with someone they could trust, someone with integrity, someone who'd proven she couldn't be bought or silenced. Within a year, I had 12 employees, all women. All mothers or women planning to become mothers. We offered unlimited maternity leave, flexible schedules, childcare assistance. Everything Brandon had seen as weakness, I built into strength. My company became profitable in 8 months. We won 3 industry awards in our first year. Brandon, meanwhile, was learning to make license plates. Justice served. People ask if I regret how I handled everything. If I wish I'd just quietly moved on instead of fighting. The answer is always no. Not for 1 second. Because fighting back wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. About ensuring other women wouldn't face what I faced. About proving that privilege doesn't make you untouchable. About showing my daughter, when she's old enough to understand, that her mother never backed down from bullies. That truth wins, even when it takes time. That mothers aren't weak, we're fierce. Brandon thought firing me would be the end of the story. His victory, my defeat.
He was wrong about that too.
The end of the story is me, sitting in my corner office, watching Lily play with toys while I run a successful company built on integrity and respect. The end of the story is Brandon, sitting in a prison cell, finally learning that actions have consequences. The end of the story is justice. Cold, complete, and absolutely satisfying. That envelope he shoved in my hands didn't end my career. It ended his. And sometimes, that's exactly how karma works. If this story of justice served cold resonated with you, smash that subscribe button. The next tale of consequences drops soon, And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when karma comes collecting with interest.